My name is Barton Morris. This is Travis Copenhaver. We are attorneys at the Cannabis Legal Group here at our offices in Royal Oak. Today we want to discuss what we can do, what you can do in order to talk a municipality or a city into opting into marijuana facilities like dispensaries, grows, social consumption. We know that there are a lot of cities out there in the state of Michigan that thus far have opted out. They have said that they do not want these facilities in their cities, and today we're going to talk about how we can get them to change their tune, change their attitude, change their ordinances in order to permit these facilities within their communities. It can't be done everywhere, but it can be done in a lot of different places. We're going to talk to you about how to do that today. First, we're going to talk about the reason why a lot of these municipalities have opted out thus far. Actually, Travis, I'll have you explain it.
Sure. I think the main reason is a pretty obvious one. This is a new type of business for Michigan, and it's a new, fairly controversial type of business for Michigan. So a lot of municipalities are taking a wait and see approach. We don't need to be the first ones to do this. We can wait and see how this plays out everywhere else. And you find yourself in this kind of stalemate situation where some municipalities need to allow these businesses or we won't have them anywhere. But the immediate gut reaction is, why here, why us? They can go do that over here, over there. I think what definitely kind of makes that even feel more impactful is we have a history of several municipalities in the state of Michigan that have allowed cannabis and are currently allowing cannabis, places like Detroit and Flint, Ann Arbor and Lansing. So a lot of the other municipalities look to our larger cities to kind of like see how things play out. That generally leads to what I believe is the main reason the opt-out kind of gut reaction occurred. But when you look past that and you start looking into like municipalities' concerns, a lot of that is just, perhaps because they're not used to what these businesses are, they can't look to see how these businesses operate and have that factual data to support some of the conclusions they're coming to. There's always concerns about odor, about safety and security, about impact on your community. I can't tell you how many times I've heard someone say the equivalent of, we don't want to be the Amsterdam of Michigan or something. So it's mostly fear of change, is in my opinion. And then there's perhaps a bit of complexity involved with passing an opt-in ordinance. Some of these communities might not have the time, resources, effort, or motivation to want to take on an ordinance project, either for medical or adult use. Or it could be a political, just they don't support or agree with cannabis, or the elected officials don't. But regardless of the reason, regardless of the situation you're finding yourself in, if you want to operate in a municipality, there are definitely some options we have available to us to try to get that conversation moving the project forward.
The MRTMA, a regulatory marijuana system, even in the Medical Marijuana Act, they have provided that the cities have the ability to decide whether they want marijuana in their city or not, right? And so it is just easier for them to say, you know what, let's just hold off now, and for many of them to do that anyway. We've seen others that have gone in, 100% force and say that they're going to allow it, but there's others that we're talking about today, the ones that are trying to lay back a little bit and see what's going on. And it's been cool is because there have been a bunch of cities that have decided to do it. All of the larger cities in the state of Michigan have decided to do it, and they are now demonstrating and provide demonstration of the fact that this is working. Even though it's early, even though it's not like we don't have a bunch of statistics, I think that it's clear that this can work. But some of the issues are coming out, like how do a lot of these cities pick the right operators?
Right.
We see a lot of lawsuits coming out. We see a lot of litigation. We see cities that are even having struggles within themselves in order to figure out how to implement the application process and the scoring criteria. So we definitely see the problems, but we also see successes too. Certainly. I would think as well. But the question is for this video is, what do we do? What can we do to get a city to opt in? And I think that for me, the number one consideration that needs to be thought of, which is, what is in it for them? What can we explain to them and provide to them to make sure that they understand that this is all what's good for the city? cities do not want, these municipal officials do not want to hear why it's good for you. Nobody does, right? They're not, that's not going to be persuasive. In order to be persuasive, they want to hear what's in it for them. In my opinion, the number one reason why a municipality would want to have facilities, marijuana facilities, is because, this is just my opinion, but it's because they want redevelopment in areas that require redevelopment.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
And I think that is a huge area of focus that a lot of municipalities lose track of. I've gone into, I mean, you have as well, Nick has too, probably hundreds of municipality meetings over the last several years as we've been doing cannabis licensing. And you go into these meetings, cannabis will be on the agenda lower down, and you'll hear the first half of the meeting, they'll talk about how they want new businesses to come to their community. They want a new job creation. They want people to start investing in their downtown development areas and things. And then we'll get to the cannabis side, and you have 40 groups showing up that they want to start and invest new businesses in that community, and the community all of a sudden is like, well, we don't want that kind of business here. This is a very quick and fast-growing industry. This is one of the few industries that is interested in your empty industrial park, that is interested in redeveloping some of the maybe less focused on areas of communities. They're focusing on communities who are willing to allow this industry in, and they're putting significant investment into those communities, places that traditionally don't see a lot of interest. So if you're a municipality and you want businesses and you're cannabis friendly, you will have cannabis businesses taking a look at your community. It'd be great if you could pick the exact business you want to come to your community, but a business needs to make that decision. You can decide who you allow in or out, but you can't convince a non-cannabis industry to come invest in your community if they're not doing it already. You can see the cannabis industry wants to invest in your community, and if your community needs investment, that's probably one of the easiest decisions to make. Let them in. You can let them in without letting in all of them. I think that's a big point that a lot of municipalities that haven't really tackled cannabis don't think about as well. If your concern is the dispensary, if your concern is the point of sale retail, you can allow growers, processors, testing labs, safety compliance facilities, you can allow transporters, because those are business to business manufacturing operations. If I'm a grow facility, I'm just growing plants. There's no sidewalk traffic impact. It's no different than another heavy industrial use that's using a building in your industrial park. If I'm a sheet metal manufacturer, no one's walking in there and out of there. They're creating materials and they are sending those materials to other businesses to use. That is what a grow facility is. That is what a processor facility is. So, depending on what the concern points are, sometimes the hardest part for me when I'm working with municipalities is choosing your battles and moving past the dispute issues. You really start with a litigation of marijuana, just the concept in general. Once you get them to kind of understand that marijuana is here, then you talk to them about two very complicated laws, the Medical Marijuana Facilities Licensing Act and the Regulation and Taxation of Marijuana Act. They can choose just medical or adult use or both. And then within both of those programs, there's several different types of licenses. So a municipality that is starting to open up to cannabis, even if they're still very against the idea, or it seems like they're not super supportive of cannabis, when you start shifting that conversation towards the details of how these laws operate, I think you're starting to make some good leeway, some good headway. And really trying to shift the concern points to implementing the ordinance as opposed to just whether or not you want to consider cannabis in the first place is really kind of the sign for me of when it's worth continuing having those conversations. If a municipality never even starts to care about how the ordinances actually work, you're usually in for an uphill battle, because even if you're completely supportive of cannabis, these ordinances can be complicated. There's 5 different main license types. You can select or limit or zone all of those license types uniquely within your community, and now we have another 7 license types on the adult use side on top of your medical ones. So one of the biggest challenges, even when you find a supportive municipality, is just getting them to tackle the complexity of this as well.
Let's talk about some of the specific strategies that we employ. I think one of the most important things to do when trying to be persuasive to municipalities is figure out, one, why they've opted out in the first place. Mm-hmm. Some municipalities have opted out because they feel as though their residents are not accepting of the fact of having marijuana facilities in their cities. Others have simply opted out because they want to investigate more. They want more information, right? And we can be the deliverers of that information. You know, we can provide them what they're looking for. So, but it's really important to understand that first, because I think if you're trying to give somebody information that they're not prepared, or they're not ready to get, or they're not at that position yet, then we're not giving them what they want. On the other hand, when we know that they're made this decision, let's say they've created an opt-out ordinance and they've put that on the books, when we know why they've done that, then I think that's probably the best place to start, because then you can be more persuasive as to how to change it. You know, one way to figure that out. Or there's many ways to figure it out. You have to do some investigation. It's all about, in my opinion, the intelligence. The more information that you're able to get regarding all of these decision-making individuals and all the decisions that they've made, and the staff that's behind it, because there's not just these municipal, like elected municipal officials. There's all types of staff that's behind it as well, people that have influenced their decision. You got to go out and talk to these people, and emails is almost always available. I mean, I can always get, it's almost like looking at their website, you can always get their emails, right? And there's, in my experience, there's always like one or two people that are like the marijuana experts.
Yeah, that's the real trick, I think.
Yeah.
Because these municipalities, you have to understand, like even the ones that are the most supportive of cannabis is not the only thing a municipality has to be responsible for. You know, it's arguably less than 5% of their overall responsibilities to their community. So one of the biggest advantages you can find is if you can identify the decision makers in the administrative side of that municipality, and more importantly, the ones who understand how their cannabis rules work. Because you'll often find what an ordinance says and how they're implementing that ordinance don't always line up as well. You know, we can always get emails, we can always get phone numbers to departments, if nothing else. Depending on your municipality, its size, its sophistication, sometimes there's no replacement for just meeting these folks in person as well. You know, especially smaller, more rural communities. A lot of smaller municipalities, both administratively and the elected officials, are part-time, they have day jobs. So, you know, trying to get a feel for how they do their job and when they have time to focus on their job can be very useful too. If you want to be kind of a squeaky wheel, but you also don't want to annoy someone you're trying to get to help you. So if you can, you know, if you have a clerk who is a full-time, you know, there every time the office is open type of job, he or she's going to be more receptive to, you know, reaching out for questions during business hours or reaching out in the morning or in the afternoon. But if you're working with a small municipality who's, you know, city manager might be also a business owner in the community and you know, put some time in the evenings occasionally, you know, calling that person throughout the day when they're not really focused on their municipal work might not be as productive as it could be if you kind of understand the situation you're working with. And like Barton said, intelligence is the key. Every municipality is different. Even two similarly sized municipalities can be structured completely differently and have a different set of motivations that are going to lead them towards the decision you're trying to encourage.
Their geographic makeup is also different.
Yep.
And I think that's also very important to take into consideration. There's a lot of cities that don't have like a traditional downtown, for instance, you know, and many of course do. And these are things that have to be taken into consideration. Many of these cities that do have a downtown generally have a downtown development like district, or a downtown development like agency or department that's interested in what's going on downtown. And perhaps they may not want facilities down there. And then you kind of look at other potential opportunities outside of the city. And there's other historical districts. And so it's definitely important to look at the makeup of the city, whether it's a township or a city council. Look at the municipal officials, whether they're full-time or not. Some township supervisors are, some are not. Let them, city council members are not. And look at the city managers. And sometimes we have strong city managers, other times not. Sometimes they have large staff, sometimes they don't. The planning commission, you know, every city is different. You know, there's different strategies, but there's a ton of information on their websites.
Almost always.
So much information, and not just you know, zoning maps are great. You know, understanding the different districts that are set up, looking at their ordinances that they have, looking at the other types of businesses that are permitted. You know, like do they have a lot of liquor stores or a lot of bars that they've licensed, you can contact the Liquor Control Commission, and actually you can get it online now. You can go directly to the website and find out how many liquor licenses are issued within a particular city or jurisdiction. That is, to me, I think a very important consideration if we're talking about a recreational drug that is many people find to be very similar, if not identical, as far as its social impact to alcohol. So at the degree to which that there are a lot of bars that a city may allow, and even if there are a lot, that doesn't mean that maybe they don't want any more, types of intoxicants that
intelligence can cut both ways. If you're not aware of the fact that there's a contingent of constituents in a municipality that are angry about, let's say, the number of bars and liquor stores, and you go in trying to weaponize that data in support of your argument, you might be shooting yourself in the foot. So, intelligence is important. In addition to, that though, and I think the reason we go to information like that is cannabis is new, but it's not really that unique in a lot of ways. So using something that they can understand or that they can use as a comparison is super useful. If you have a community that's open to the idea of retail, of either a provisioning center or adult use retailer, and they want to pick a number to cap the number of businesses they're going to allow in their community, that's when the number of liquor stores and bars can be super useful, because if they want to just pick a number out of the air and base that on nothing, coming to them with an argument about, well, your community currently supports 8 bars and 5 liquor stores, so assuming that there's a reasonable amount of demand that's similar to that in this area, you might find that those numbers would be more appropriate than the 2 you're trying to pick for no reason. Or whatever your priorities are. You can weaponize that as well. If you think you're going to win that application, it might be in your best interest to show, well, there's only one other liquor store in the township. Maybe you should start with one and try to win your shot. Yeah. So, it goes both ways. But collecting that information and using it is really the trick, and there's only really one way to understand kind of the heartbeat of a municipality. You need to get some ground game going. You need to not only call and email, you should attend meetings, you should identify who the decision makers are in that community, and then understand what motivates them. Because at the end of the day, we are asking a municipality to do something that they do not have to do. If they don't want to opt in, they don't have to. So you have to convince them to do so, and there's a lot of different ways to do that.
Going to those meetings, looking at the meeting minutes of prior meetings, those are all ways to figure out what's important to them.
Exactly.
And I think it's also who's approaching them as well.
Yep.
These municipal officials are generally going to listen to their constituents more, or people that have had long-standing business interests or businesses within that municipality, especially if they've created other relationships in the city prior to this. That may not be available every single time, but if it is, trust me, that is something that is going to be highly regarded. It's going to be very influential. In fact, I can tell you that a lot of cities, when they are deciding the merit-based criteria upon which that they're going to select the applicants that they believe are best for their city, there's generally going to be, and it's very often included, points for those that have already established a business relationship or a business within their city, or people that have owned property within their city, or residents of their city. In fact, I believe that, just talking about Detroit, like recently we were told Detroit's going to continue to opt out of their recreational. Again, not because they're going to completely opt out forever, but because they want to opt in on their terms. And one of the things that I'm certain of is that that they're going to include provisions whereby the residents are going to be able to benefit from. I think it's a great idea that the residents are going to be able to benefit from a lot of these businesses that are going to be now included, like for instance social consumption establishments or even delivery services. They want to ensure that there's a place for their residents to be able to advance some of those social equity issues that they would like to do. And so they're just making sure that it's going to be introduced in the right way. There's a way to continue to be a part of that conversation in all these cities, so we don't necessarily just wait for them to do something. And I think this is a very, very, very good recommendation. don't wait to see if an ordinance or see if their legislation is going to benefit you. Be a part of the conversation, or be a part of that decision-making process to ensure that it's going to benefit you. I can tell you without a doubt and provide numerous examples of including yourself within that conversation, knowing that they're interested in what you have to say. You know, like a lot of people are really interested, a lot of municipal officials are interested about what people that they're interested in hearing from want to say about what they're intending on doing. They want that information. If you think that a letter or email is not going to be influential, you're wrong. It is. In fact, that's a great way to introduce yourself and introduce what's important to you and what you can do for them. Then you can follow it up with an in-person conversation, or showing up at a meeting, or there's an infinite number of ways really to be influential, and certainly being creative is another way to do it. But you got to think about a good strategy, and every city's different. So I think that the more information that you're able to get about a city and its municipal officials before you actually maybe take some action is a great idea. Right,
and it's important to understand too that when you are being a participant in the design of whatever the ordinance will end up being, you will have the real-time information you need to make strategic decisions to use it. You know, an ordinance, typically the zoning ordinance is going to go through a planning commission, and then it's going to be read at city council and then read again for adoption. That's going to be a minimum of at least 2 to 3 meetings. You're going to have several weeks to understand what is likely to happen. Obviously, it's not set in stone until it's set in stone, but it's unlikely to change when those ordinances are getting finalized. You'll have a few extra weeks before it makes the news that X community opted in to start looking for the right spot or preparing your application. You know, we talked a lot about talking to the municipality directly. Detroit's a great example of this. Sometimes you don't need to start your conversation with the municipality. It can be just as useful to start your conversation with key community leaders, whether those are groups that are active in the community, like neighborhood associations, prominent business owners. If you want to be a participant in one of these municipalities, a lot of times the scoring criteria is going to come down to community engagement, community benefit. If you can start building relationships not only with the municipality but with the municipality's constituents, if you can get things like letters of support, if you can enter into strategic charitable agreements with businesses and organizations that operate in that community, you can start hopefully getting those businesses to support you. And I know if I were an elected official in a municipality and a business came to me with the support of my community, I'm going to be a lot more interested in hearing from them than if that individual or business started the conversation with me directly and I have to make the assumption of whether or not I think the community is going to go for this. So, you know, your strategy is unique to you. It's really important that you understand it's the most important relationship you can have as a cannabis business owner is the one with your municipality. The state's pre-qualification process, objective and fair. The municipality's selection process does not always have to be, but if you are selected and you go into the facility application portion of your state application, it is objective and fair. So the part of this process that is unfortunately not objective and fair in a lot of times is the local selection process. And, you know, understanding the game and participating in that game is going to help you see success. And, you know, sometimes every edge matters. If you think you can get an advantage by putting the work in and developing these relationships or having someone on your team help you develop these relationships, you'll likely see a lot more success than the people who don't decide to take that step.
I wholeheartedly believe that this is one of the most important things that operators can do in order to be able to successfully obtain these licenses. Anybody can get a state license. Getting the municipal license is the key to this operation. It's the key to success. And we could probably sit here and talk about it for another 20 or 30 minutes or even longer. We're not going to. Instead, we will leave you with that and again impress upon the importance of developing these relationships, helping these municipalities understand the benefits of cannabis within their communities, understand that it's not going to be for every community, which is completely fine as well. Things are going to take time to develop. This is not, so many cities may decide to do this next year or the following year. But sometimes that's what's necessary in order to get a license too, right? Like, you have to be there from the beginning and to help them through that process. That is something that I can tell you right now. There are many cities that I developed relationships with years ago. That are now, those relationships are beginning to bear fruit, or at least become meaningful, you know. And it's been a two-way street. I'm not interested in doing something only for ourselves. We're interested in doing something for them as well. And that's kind of how you have to look at it. And you know, it's
don't get discouraged. It's a process. You know, when it works fast, that's awesome. But sometimes if you put the work in, you'll see the dividends down the road. And if that's a municipality you actually want to be in, then sometimes that's the only way it's going to happen. So,
all right. So thanks for watching. You can see the rest of our shows on our Facebook page, also our YouTube page. Go to our website for more information. We like providing this information, and we're going to get out as much out as we can. You know, for Travis, Barton Morris, thanks again.